Let's get more analysis on the G20 summit and the global economy with John Allison. He's the CEO of Unio Capital. John, as always, a pleasure. Good to have you.
My pleasure is mine.
So, John, the IMF is warning that the global economy is, quote, highly vulnerable. George Osborne, the UK's Chancellor of the Exchequer, their finance minister, saying that the risks facing the world are at their most heightened since the financial crisis. Those are some pretty serious words. Is the global economy in such bad shape?
No. I think the global economy, to put it in context, starting in 2007, we began what's probably a 20-30 year period of dislocation, structural change that involves low growth, low inflation, deleveraging, and China rebalancing. That's the big context. So sometimes growth is slower, sometimes growth is faster. We're in sort of a slower part of slower growth. But it's not that different.
But it's still growth.
It's still growth. That's the point. And now they have to say things like that. I don't blame them for saying it because they want to energize everybody to do something because they want to come out of this not just speaking words.
Well, they are calling for coordinated action. What does that mean?
Coordinated action is something hopefully they'll discuss a lot more in the background than what they say in public, but it's ultimately saying if there are crises of various kinds, or even if there's preventative medicine against crises, that the major powers are actually acting in concert and not acting one against the other. For example, you don't want to have a currency war in order to have one country do better than another. You don't want to have a trade war, and you've seen in some of the debates among our political candidates that they're here in the U.S., they're talking about things that, actually smell of trade war, which is, not something we want to see in the world as investors or anybody else.
In terms of action, though, what fiscal or monetary policy can be coordinated amongst G20 leaders? Is this something that could be on the table?
The fiscal policy actually could be coordinated in the sense that fiscal policy has really been doing very, very little in the past 7 years. There's an enormous amount of, for example, infrastructure spending that could be done, not so much in China where they've done a lot, but even there, but in the US and Europe, that would actually increase productivity, that would actually help the restructuring that the world desperately needs to get out of this big, dark place that it's been in and probably will be in for some time to come. So the fiscal policy could do things. Monetary policy has not run out of tools. Monetary policy, I think people are confusing monetary policy used to combat crises, which is what they've been doing for the past 9 years, with monetary policy actually helping with restructuring.
Well, the German finance minister, Wolfgang Schäuble, he's speaking out quite strongly against monetary policy. He said that monetary firepower is now limited and that growth fueled by government spending alone has what he says zombified economies. Does he have a point? Have we just become numb to all of this at this stage?
Yeah, well, I think Mr. Schäuble, for whom I have great respect, is also talking to his German audience, which tends to love stuff like this. But
they love zombies.
Yeah, they love basically very tight monetary policy and no fiscal policy. But the truth is that actually Mario Draghi has done a great deal to help Europe with his looser monetary policy, and actually has turned out to be right. There is no inflation as the Germans feared. So I think, and as far as fiscal policy is concerned, again, with great respect to Mr. Schäuble, who I think is correct in wanting restructuring in Europe, I think he is underestimating the problem of Germany not helping the rest of Europe actually get out of its demand hole.
Well, if they don't want to help with a coordinated action plan either, he says Germany would not be on board with that.
Yeah, the thing is, Mr. Schäuble is a very smart man, and I suspect that he's saying all of this in public, but in private, he's a lot more malleable, is my guess.
Let's talk very quickly about China's role in here. The meeting is being held in Shanghai. China's rebalancing of its economy, its new normal, is being highlighted as one of the biggest factors behind the global economic slowdown. And the People's Bank of China governor says that China will strike a balance between growth, restructuring, and risk management. How is that new? Is this not what we've been saying all along?
Well, first of all, I think he's completely right. I also think China is the key to things staying on balance. So actually, all of us, including our company, are very interested in what China does. I think the Governor Zhou had an interview on February 13th in which he talked about currency stability, but he also tied it in with the reform program, the restructuring program in China. I think he's completely right that a stable currency is actually connected to shifting more resources in China away from investing toward the consumer. So they've been talking, but actually the Chinese are doing things. It's slow. It's a very tough act they're trying to follow. I have great confidence they're going to make it, and so I think he's actually a fantastic governor.
Well, there has been a lot of structural reform there, something that IMF chief Christine Lagarde is calling for more of. Now, John, as you know, there's always a lot of talk at these meetings.
Yes.
Best case scenario, what would be your expectation of concrete, tangible action that could come out at the end of this G20 weekend meeting?
So I would say, in terms of what they publicly say, I think everybody's going to come to the conclusion that they're talking very nice talk, but maybe there's not a lot going on. However, in the background, I think a number of things are going to happen. We believe. First of all, I think coordinated action is going to be something they really will agree on. I think they will agree on not having currency wars, not having trade wars. I think they will agree to some degree on increasing worldwide demand. I think that they will also, and very strongly, push governments to continue restructuring programs, which are very difficult, as we all know. They're very difficult politically, they're difficult socially, and they need somebody to prod them. And Madame Lagarde actually is a very important force prodding everybody along that path. So I think it's all going to take place in the background, unfortunately for your public viewers.
Well, as long as it's taking place somewhere and those structural reforms do happen in the long run. All right, thank you so much, John Allison, CEO of Unio Capital.